present reality that certainly, some people have done horrible things in the name of Islam, or, but that doesn't represent the entirety of Muslims in the world today, which are 25% of the world's population, or historically, that there have been many different diverse ways of being a Muslim. And actually, one of the reasons why I'm proud to teach about Islam in South Asia is that if you put together all the countries in South Asia, it's the biggest, the region with the most Muslims in the world. And I don't think people realize that. So it's important for us to think about, the Islam that we practice in South Asia is actually much more common and much more normative. And then I think, I was very opposed to the policies of President George Bush and his approach to Muslim majority countries and some of the things that he would say. And so I became involved in campaigning for President Obama when he ran.
Okay.
And that was my first involvement in electoral politics, because I saw the huge impact that whoever is the leader gets to make. And then when I, what in my advocacy was calling my congressperson and was very disappointed in their position, that's when I started to think that maybe people like myself should be the decision makers, because you can advocate and it's very important to advocate, but ultimately the person in that seat gets to decide how they're going to vote.
Right. Okay. So over the period of years, I mean, we're going back to 2011 and then here we are in 2023. Do you think Islamophobia has changed? Do you think we've moved forward? Have people's perspective changed?
I think, sadly, it's gotten worse. Because I think right after September 11th, lots of Americans who are not Muslim were just like, I don't know anything about Islam, or, they didn't really know how to read what this was. But I would say now we've had 20 plus years of a very intensive Islamophobia industry, where their entire message is constantly to paint every Muslim in the world as someone negative, someone dangerous. And I think in a certain segment of the population in America, they've come to believe that misinformation is fact, and they just have these outlandish sorts of beliefs, like, oh, Muslims can lie and Muslims can do this, and Muslims are told they have to kill everyone who's not Muslim. And I'm like, this isn't even making sense, but they've been told that over and over and over, and they've heard it on the, whatever news programs they're watching, and they've read it in whatever books they're reading. So I think it's hard to undo that sort of programming and messaging. I do think, on the other hand, in more cosmopolitan spaces where there are more Muslims, when people see that personal example, when they have a doctor who's Muslim, or an elected official or anything like that, that does change the narrative. But I wouldn't say that we are in a much better place. I think there's a lot of challenges. It's almost as if there's two realities in this country at the same time. Some people who are living in this space where they're so fearful and they think anything different is dangerous, and they certainly have especially a fear of Muslims. And then there is another space where there are more opportunities opening up.
So in your experience, and what do you think is the best way to break that rhetoric, or change the mindset? I know you started off a group called Mosaic, which was sort of directed not just against Islamophobia, but anti-Semitism, and then against racial discrimination against minority populations. So is that something that can help, and what other things would change that rhetoric?
Yeah, so during my first year in elected office, there was an anti-Muslim bias crime in my town where someone left pork on a Muslim family's car.
Wow.
And, the mayor at that time said, well, we don't really know what's motivating it, and unless it happens again, it's not really a pattern. And I was able to share research that pork is used to target Muslims, and that Islamophobia is a type of racism, and that if you don't address bias crimes when they first start happening, they tend to escalate. And so it's very important to address things right away. And yes, I started a discussion group called Montgomery Mosaic, where we discuss things like anti-Black racism, Islamophobia, anti-Semitism, because I didn't want to make it a one-off discussion. I wanted a sustained conversation.
Right.
And we actually had the first 2 sessions in a synagogue in town, and then we had some other discussions at some of the different churches in town and community centers. And I think that that was a really important way to build community. I think that the local space is very promising, because a lot of times the hate, people say it from behind screens when they're very far away. When you see someone face to face and you see their humanity, I think some of that hate naturally, hopefully dissipates. And so I think the local space is a promising one, but we have to be very active and we have to be in solidarity. Like, we cannot only think about Muslim issues. We have to think about how to address racism. We have to think about how to address misogyny. All of these types of hate, one of the things that I'm not the first to say this, but hate just keeps growing and growing. And so we can't think, oh, well, they're not attacking us, so it's okay. Eventually it's going to come to us. Yes. So it's really important to build a more inclusive society for everyone.